I wanted to actually bring up James Valentine and thank him on behalf of the foundation and on behalf of the other patient advocates. When we went down the path of applying for the LOI for the external meeting and for getting it, we were in a bit over our heads, and we wanted to make sure that we knew the MPN world, but we didn't know how to best convey all that we hear. So we're really happy to have his partnership in this. And also, just on one note, Robin mentioned the NCCN patient guidelines or clinician guidelines. We actually have copies of the NCCN patient guidelines. If you want to take a free copy, they're right outside. So thank you, James.
Thank you, Michelle, and good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be with you all today and navigate us through this exciting opportunity, this patient-focused drug development meeting on MPNs. I'll be serving as your moderator and guide as we progress, and to start out, I'd like to walk us through a bit of our plan for how we hope to get as much patient and direct caregiver input throughout the course of today, and a bit of how that's organized. But first, I want to just say a little bit about the patient-focused drug development initiative more broadly. This was an initiative, to FDA's great credit, that it proposed back in prior to 2012, leading into the fifth reauthorization of this law that's called the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, or PDUFA. And this PDUFA law is an opportunity for FDA to collect user fees from industry to help fund and supplement taxpayer dollars to do the important review work that it does for new medical products. And so as every 5 years, as this law is reauthorized, different commitments are put in place for these user fees to be used in addition to just the routine day-to-day. How do we advance the way that drugs are reviewed in this country? And so back in 2012, patient-focused drug development was added to that list of commitments as a way for the Food and Drug Administration, in partnership with patients who the agency recognized are experts in their condition and have a seat at the table, as a more systematic way to bring you to the table and hear from you and allow your inputs to make a difference, help the agency and drug developers as they think through what clinical trials should look like, what outcome measures should be included in trials, what actually represents a meaningful benefit on those different outcome measures, those things that are looked at and collected during the clinical trial itself. And then ultimately, at the time of approval, as FDA is looking to see whether the benefits of a drug outweigh the risks of that drug, it's very important to make that judgment with the very particular disease and the patient population that bears the burden of that disease, and keep that in mind. And so the Food and Drug Administration have been partners to us in putting together this meeting. They're here to listen and to learn, both here in person as well as on the webcast. And they will also be receiving a summary report, the Voice of the Patient report, that will live on and carry your voices to them and provide them a resource for making sure that they have your input as they make these critical decisions throughout the course of drug development. FDA first hosted a series of these meetings under that original commitment. They hosted actually well above the 20 they committed to. They've hosted 26 of their own FDA-led meetings. But with just even in rare diseases, with over 7,000 known rare diseases, the demand for these meetings was much greater than the agency could keep up with themselves. And so they smartly decided to broaden the program and shift to pass the torch to patient organizations to host these externally led meetings like the one we're having today. And today actually marks the 28th externally led patient-focused drug development meeting. So we've now surpassed the original FDA-led ones. It's a very exciting day. So today, what exactly are we discussing? What is the focus of this patient-focused drug development meeting? Well, we've organized the day to help provide the patient experience and patient preferences around two topics. In the morning, we're going to be discussing disease symptoms and the impact of the disease on the patient in their life. And then in the afternoon, we're going to build on that topic, reconvene, and talk about current approaches to treatments. And we're going to look at the different ways that you all treat, try to prevent and manage your disease, and how well those things are working, as well as get some perspectives on what you all are looking for from future approaches to treatment. As we all, I think, collectively know and appreciate that you need more options. So for each of those two topics, what will discussions look like? Well, we've designed this meeting to really include 3 different methods for today for getting your input. First, for each of those topics, we're going to hear from a panel of patients and caregivers. Their role is to help set the foundation for the discussion. They'll each be sharing their own personal experiences that reflect a range of different experiences with MPNs. Certainly, they will not reflect the full experience. That would be impossible, even if we had asked them each to speak for hours. This is going to launch us into broader input from those of you that are participating today in the audience, as well as those that are following along on the webcast. We hope and expect for you to participate actively as well. The first way that we'll do that, and as we broaden, is we're going to move into a set of live polling questions. You'll be able to use your cell phones, or if you have them, tablets or laptops, to go to a URL, which I'll provide in a moment, and we'll provide you with some polling questions that we'd like you to respond to. And again, this is for our patients and direct caregivers in the room, not for other stakeholders. These will give us a sense of the different experiences that we have represented today, and will also help us in facilitating into our third method for getting your input, which is through a facilitated audience discussion. So knowing the experiences that we have, we're going to want to dive deeper, and we're going to ask all of our patients and caregivers in the room, as well as those on the web, to provide specifics about their experiences and help us work through a number of discussion questions that we have. And so during this period of time, I'll be posing questions. For those of you in the room, I'll be asking you to raise your hand, patients and caregivers, and I will call on you, at which time I just ask that you say your name and your current form of MPN. For those of you that are following along on the web, we have an email address which is listed on the slide that you see now, communications@mpnrf.org, and you can provide your written questions to, or responses to those discussion questions. And Lindsay White, who will be serving as our webcast moderator, will be raising her hand throughout the course of the discussions to share experiences of those following along on the web. But whether you're participating here today in the room or on the web, or perhaps you weren't able to make it here and you're watching the recording of this webcast, we do want you to provide your comments, and we'll continue to use that email box to solicit written comments to our different discussion questions, and all of that input from our panel sessions today, our polling questions, our facilitated audience discussion, and then those additional written comments will together be summarized in what is called a Voice of the Patient report, which is a summary report that's going to leverage your words from today to help summarize your inputs on these key discussion questions that we have. I will note that we have limited time today, and so I know not everyone will have an opportunity to speak to every topic, and certainly for all of our webcast participants, we may not be able to get to read all of your comments, but please know any written comment that is provided to us, whether it's read aloud today or not, will be part of the record and will be summarized in that Voice of the Patient report. So before we dive into our first set of live polling questions, which are on demographics to get a sense of our patients and caregivers we have participating, I would like to walk through a set of ground rules for today. So first, we highly encourage individuals with MPNs and their direct caregivers, their spouses, parents, children, siblings, to contribute to the dialogue. We have today with us representatives from the FDA, from industry who are developing medical products, from clinicians. They are all here to listen to you. I also want to note that the views expressed today are going to be inherently personal, and at times the discussion is likely to get emotional. We're asking you to talk about deeply personal experiences in your lives. So to that end, I would note that respect for one another is paramount. We know that there may be both common experiences, but also differing experiences and perspectives, and we want to make sure all of those are heard today. And then finally, again, I've noted that we do have limited time today, and so also along the lines of being respectful to one another, I'll just ask that you, when we do get to the audience discussion, that you please be focused and concise in your comments. That will allow us to hear as many voices as possible. And certainly, if you have more to say, we'll be happy to come back to you throughout the discussion. So, having laid out what our mission is for today, let's get to it. So for all of our patients and caregivers here in the room, for those of you following online, I'm going to ask that you pull out your device that you're going to be using for polling. Cell phone is perfectly good. And go to the URL www.pollev.com/MPNRF. And that's displayed here on the top of this question. And our first question for those of you today is, are you a patient or a caregiver? If you're having any issues getting into the system, please raise your hand and we'll make sure someone can help you. Again, this is for all of our patients and direct caregivers in the room today. For those of you who are here to listen, we ask that you please not participate in these polling questions. Anyone having any issues getting in, please raise your hand and we'll make sure to get someone to you. Okay, we'll give you just a couple more moments. This first set of questions will be the easiest of the day. They'll be a little bit more difficult as we ask you to prioritize and rank things later in our session. So it looks like the vast majority of our participants today are patients themselves at 85%. And then we also have representatives that are caregivers of our patients at about 15%. As we move forward for our caregivers, please continue to answer these questions. They're phrased for the patient, but we want you to answer them on behalf of the patient. So as if you'll see with our next question, the MPN or related disease I was originally diagnosed with was, please answer this for the patient that you provide care for. And so your options here are A for PV, B for ET, C for MF, D for acute leukemia, E for other, or F if you're unsure which disease you were originally diagnosed with. All right, just give you a few more moments to get your responses in. Let us know which of these MPNs or related diseases you were originally diagnosed with. So it looks like it's currently pretty close between PV and ET, near 40% of our participants having been originally diagnosed with one of those, and then about a little over 15% having originally been diagnosed with MF. We can go to our next question. So now we're asking you about your current diagnosis or the current diagnosis of the patient that you care for. Same options, A, PV, B, ET, C, MF, D, leukemia, E, other, or F if you're unsure what your current diagnosis is. So as the final responses are trickling in, it looks like here we've seen a shift. We have for current diagnosis about 40% of our participants currently being diagnosed with either PV or MF, and then about a fifth of our participants being diagnosed currently with ET. And if we can go to the next question. So where do you or the patient that you care for currently reside? Your options are A, the U.S. Pacific, which includes California, B, the U.S. West and Mountain Region, C, the U.S. Midwest, D, the U.S. South, which includes Texas, E, the U.S. Northeast and New England, F for Canada, G for Mexico, or H if outside of North America. Okay, what final results trickle in? It looks like we have about half of our participants being from the U.S. Northeast and New England, perhaps a little biased from our meeting location and start time. For those of you that are on the West Coast on the webcast, thank you for dialing in quite early in your day. But we do have representation from all of the U.S. regions listed, as well as some participation from both Canada and Mexico. So the only area not represented today is outside of North America. If we can go to our next question. The following best describes your age or the age of the patient for which you care. And your options are A, if under age 18, B, age 18 to 20, C, age 21 to 30, D, age 31 to 40, E, aged 41 to 50, F, aged 50 to 59, G, 60 to 69, H, 70 to 79, or I for 80 years old and above. Which of the following best describes your age or the age for the patient for which you care? Okay, we're getting faster at this. Our greatest representation are with patients that are aged 60 to 69 years, followed by about a quarter of patients aged 50 to 59, and about a fifth of patients aged 70 to 79. We do, however, have representation from patients in other age ranges younger than that, except for the 18 to 20-year-old range, but we do have representation under age 18. Also no representation for patients that are 80 years old and above. And our final demographic question, please. And so this question is, when were you or the patient that you care for first diagnosed with an MPN? Your options are A, in the last year, B, in the last 1 to 5 years, C, between 5 to 10 years ago, D, between 10 to 20 years ago, or E, more than 20 years ago. Okay, while the final results trickle in, it looks like here we have a nice spread of experience of time since diagnosis with an MPN, the largest being a little over a quarter, being between 10 to 20 years ago, but then all of the others with good representation, including those that were diagnosed both in the last year, as well as those that were diagnosed more than 20 years ago. So it would be very important for us to hear how your MPN experience might have changed over time across these different periods of time with the condition. All right, and that concludes our demographic polling.